This is a quick intro because it's the Overwatch League Preview Show, week 3, and there's a lot to go through. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we're going to get right into the games. The first one being the Paris Eternal playing the Atlanta Reign. Paris actually did pretty well this week, taking a map of Houston, and they beat the Vancouver Titans. So they already start off better than the Atlanta Reign, who lost both their games in week 1 against the Florida Mayhem and the Toronto Defiant. Paris definitely looked better against the Titans, but I would give Atlanta the title of gatekeepers in this season, as they normally are. They should beat the teams that they're supposed to beat, like Paris, and so I'll give them the win 3-1. Next up, we have the battle of the bad teams from last season, Washington versus Boston. And yes, I know the Justice made a playoff run last season, but in the regular season, they were pretty bad. It's incredible to see the difference between these teams now. The Justice start 2-0, being both the Fuel and the Titans, both 3-1, whereas Boston start 0-2, losing to the Gladiators and the Fuel without even winning a map. Now, I wouldn't say Justice are the best team in the league, but I could see them challenging for top 3, and that's a massive turnaround from last season. They're going to roll through Boston here, and they'll win it 3-0. APAC time, and we start off with the two worst teams in the division. This is the 5 for 7th place as the Guangzhou Charge take on the LA Valiant. And honestly, I don't really want to watch this game. The level of Overwatch from these teams isn't horrible, but it's not great either, and they're both 0-2 so far. However, Valiant did manage to win a map against Chengdu, whereas the Charge haven't won a map yet, and that's the only real thing to go off. I don't think Valiant could actually win this game, and their players are better than expected. I mean, Molarman is kind of a goat. I don't know. But I want to see their org flop, so I'm predicting Charge to win this game 3-1. Get into some better games now, as we get to see the Seoul Dynasty take on the NYXL next. Both of these teams are 1-1, with Seoul being the Valiant and losing to the Fusion week 1, and NYXL losing to Chengdu but beating the Hangzhou Spark in week 2. This is the battle for the middle of the pack, and this game could decide which of these teams can make the main melee. And I have to give the edge to Seoul here. I think NYXL just aren't quite there yet, and I think Seoul will have the edge this season, so I'm expecting them to win this series 3-1. The Shanghai Dragons take on the Hangzhou Spark next, and I expect to see a much improved Dragons team from their week 1 loss to the Chengdu Hunters. This is a team that has tons of talent, but they look slow in week 1, so they've had these 2 weeks to improve and figure things out. On the other side, Hangzhou put up a good fight against the Fusion, taking a map and having chances to win more, but they were then poor against the NYXL. If this team can figure out their best starting lineup and become more consistent, I can see them being an amazing team, but it's going to take some time, and Dragons have a better foundation so far, so I think Dragons take this one 3-1. NA Day 2 starts with another battle of the bottom, with Boston playing London. And both these teams haven't really looked great so far, although both have played difficult teams. This one might be another horrible game to watch, but there is potential for both these teams to improve over the week. British Hurricane were definitely dominant in contenders, but Overwatch League is clearly a different story, and the step up, I say, is a lot bigger than some people expect. They look kind of out of depth in their first 2 games, and I think because of this, I'm going to give Boston the win here, which is quite surprising because I think both teams have been pretty bad. So I'll give London a map because I think they're pretty close, but I'm going to give it to Boston 3-1. After this, we go back up the table with the Shock taking on the Mayhem, and both these teams have been looking good to start off. Although Florida are 2-0, they beat Atlanta and Vancouver, and the Shock may have lost to Houston, but I do still think Shock are the better team so far. The Houston series was insane. It went to 6 maps, and Shock definitely had it in their hands to win it on Havana, even though they lost. And on the other side, Florida looked great against Atlanta, but they look quite shaky at times against the Titans. And I think a better team like Shock will definitely take advantage of those mistakes. So I would say that Shock takes the game, but Florida takes a map. Shock win this one 3-1. Battle of the 2-0 teams finishes off day 2, with Toronto taking on Washington. And although these 2 teams have a 100% record, they have gone about it in very different ways. Toronto played Titans and didn't look too great, but it's Titans, so of course they won it 3-1. And then they had to reverse sweep Atlanta in the final game of week 1. It's great to see that they have the mental to bring it back, and they did look much better in the last 3 maps, but the teams they've played are not top 6, and they only just got through it. whereas the Justice got a clean 3-1 win against Dallas, who are definitely top six. And although they also dropped a map to the Titans, I think they looked better overall in that series. So because of this, I predict the Justice to win this one, and I say that they'll take it 3-1. Day 3. The Seoul Dynasty start things off against the LA Valiant, and well, this one should be quick. Seoul should look a lot better than the Valiant here, and maybe Valiant could take a map. They did against the Hunters, so who knows. But other than that, I don't see Valiant really doing much else. It's just a question this season of which team could the Valiant beat, or are they going to go winless across the whole season? Who knows? I think Seoul have looked a lot better than them, and although I do think Seoul will drop a map because I think Seoul can be rather inconsistent, I think they still win this game pretty easily. So I'll give them the win 3-1. Following this, we had the Battle of the Zhous, with Guangzhou taking on Hangzhou in the second game. I think this is where Hangzhou picks up their first win. From watching their games, I see they do have potential, and if they play more like they did against Fusion, they should be too much for the Charge, who haven't even won a map up to this point of making this video. The Charge do have some potential. They have had some good moments. I think some of their rookies look good, but they haven't really shown anything more than that. And I think the Spark have. So I'm going to give this series to the Spark, although I do think Charge will pick up a map. I think every game at this point is going to be 3-1. Most of them, anyway. Spark win this one 3-1. Finishing off APAC this week, we have the Shanghai Dragons versus the NYXL, and I actually don't think this one's going to be a 3-1. I expect the Dragons to be looking much improved here and to have beaten the Spark already this week, so I think the confidence should be high and they should be looking a lot better than they did at the end of week 1. NOXL did look pretty good against the Spark, but I think the Spark kind of beat themselves in that game, so it's not enough for me to give them the edge in this game. I think the NYXL aren't really up to the level of Shanghai, or they shouldn't be, and I think Shanghai are going to sweep this one, winning at 3-0. Florida Mayhem versus Paris Eternal. The battle of which team has the shortest names. We have OG versus Dan, BQB and Yaki versus Naga and Suna, Slime versus Khan. The only letdowns really here are Gargo and Gagnergen for Florida, and Elevo and Neptuna for Paris. But overall, not many characters in these names. Keeping it short, keeping it sweet. You love to see that. As you can probably tell, don't really have much to say about this game. I think Florida are the better team. I think Paris are worse. I don't think Paris are bad, really. I think they showed some good signs, but I think Florida just takes this one. I'll give Paris a map because Florida have dropped maps against something like the Titans, but I think Florida still wins it 3-1. After watching the Toronto Defiant struggle through their first game against the Titans in week 1, here we are going into week 3 with a chance of them going 4-0, and a London Spitfire team with so much hype coming over from their contenders record, possibly finishing their first month 0-4. I predict that one of these things will come true, and that's not Toronto going 4-0, but rather the London fans are going to have to wait a little bit longer for their first win. Toronto just looks stronger. They look overall more cohesive. They look like they're ready for the challenges. They look like they can adapt. They just look overall better than London at the moment, and I predict them to win it 3-1. Week 3 finishes off with a small bang as the Shock face the Atlanta Reign to round out the action. Atlanta are a very gatekeeper team, and usually they beat people they're supposed to beat, but they can't beat anyone who's better than them in the standings, and Shock are one of those teams. However, this game could matter a lot. I think if Atlanta wins their game earlier in the week and they somehow manage to beat the Shock, I think Atlanta will be able to make playoffs if they do well enough. However, unfortunately for Atlanta fans, I don't see them beating the Shock here. I think the San Francisco Shock would just be too strong for them. I think Atlanta will pick up a map, but I think Shock will win this one pretty comfortably in a 3-1. And that does it for the matches for this week. There could be some real bangers, so make sure you tune in as this is the final week before the main Melee tournament, and these matches decide who's qualifying and who's missing out. I'm going to try and do something new next week to get a recap video out early on, just reviewing the games from this week, and then a tournament preview and predictions for later on in the week. So make sure you guys like and subscribe, hit the bell, keep a tab open on my channel, constantly refresh, wait for a new video, let it consume your life. You know what to do. See you in the next one. Peace.